The DeSantis versus Disney saga rages on. A Democrat questions California's red state travel ban, and Trump vows retaliation if he's elected. That and more on this week's headlines. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Scientists discovered an ecosystem of coastal marine life living on the Great Pacific Garbage Patch out in the open ocean. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is a large collection of non-biodegradable plastic garbage floating in the Pacific Ocean between California and Hawaii. The creatures living on it are thousands of miles from their native homes, but are thriving in the permanent thin layer of filth. Big deal. A bunch of creatures on the bottom of the food chain able to survive and reproduce on a heap of trash floating in salt water. That's already been happening for decades. It's called Staten Island. The only difference is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch smells nicer. Speaking of garbage places with a thriving ecosystem, Florida. The Florida House of Representatives passed a bill that would allow a jury to recommend the death penalty without a unanimous decision. The bill came into existence after a split jury denied a judge from giving the 2018 Parkland school shooter a death sentence. Before this, out of 27 states that have the death penalty, only 3 were able to use it without a unanimous recommendation from the jury. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed the bill. Now a jury can recommend the judge give the death penalty with an 8-4 vote. This is part of DeSantis' tough-on-crime messaging. He's also expected to sign a bill that expands the death penalty to include anyone who commits sexual battery on children under the age of 12. A 2008 Supreme Court decision ruled this unconstitutional, as they deemed it cruel and unusual to kill a prisoner over a crime where the victim didn't die. But that was the old Supreme Court. This Supreme Court is still pretty old, but they're way more conservative, so why not see if they'll upend the ruling? These expansions to the death penalty scare some people because a number of prisoners are convicted of crimes they didn't commit. So there's always a chance that you could be executing an innocent person. And it scares me, because if this is happening in Florida, that means those juries are made up of Floridians. Forget that they're recommending the state kill the defendant. I'm worried they'll start recommending how the state kills them. Might need a new Supreme Court case to determine whether or not death by waterboarding at a wet t-shirt contest is unconstitutional. Speaking of Ron DeSantis, his power struggle with Disney World continued this week. I covered this battle extensively in another video. You can check it out in the link below. Basically, it all boils down to a spat the two sides had over Florida's Parental Rights in Education bill, or as critics call it, the Don't Say Gay bill. The original bill included restrictions on teaching about sexual orientation and gender identity in grades K through 3. This week, the rules were expanded through 12th grade. Disney stood against the Parental Rights in Education bill and vowed to help repeal it. So, DeSantis installed allies of his on the Board of Supervisors for Disney World's Special Taxing District. However, Disney made a deal with the outgoing members of the old board, which nullified Florida's power over the company. DeSantis vowed to strike back, saying, "We made the decision as a state, as a people, through the medium of our elections, that we could not have one corporation serving as its own government." Yeah, this is America. We're not going to be run by a single corporation. We're going to be run by a bunch of corporations. This is a corporatocracy. Democracy. DeSantis threatened to raise Disney's taxes and potentially even build a prison next to the park. A prison next to Disney? That isn't the terrifying threat that DeSantis thinks it is. Because compared to dealing with their kids, and especially other people's kids, at Epcot, most parents would prefer being in prison. You're telling me I could visit somewhere quiet, and that vacation could last for years? Sign me up. More after the break. Welcome back. Economists from Goldman Sachs predicted that in the near future, nearly 2/3 of American jobs could at least partially be automated by artificial intelligence. So I guess Iowa's Senate passing a law allowing minors to work longer hours and even serve alcohol is a good thing? Gotta loosen those child labor laws now before the robots take those kids' jobs. The Economist and others predicted AI in the workforce will have an enormous impact on humanity's way of life. Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, and over 27,000 others have signed an open letter calling on AI labs to suspend training of systems more powerful than ChatGPT for 6 months. In the letter, they asked them to consider if it's worth making so many human jobs obsolete. When CEOs ask if it's worth getting rid of human jobs that computers could do for free, you know it's serious. Them looking at anything other than the bottom line is like a heroin addict saying they won't shoot up the product unless it was locally sourced. While having artificial intelligence impact most jobs sounds scary, on the bright side, it'd be nice to see any form of intelligence at the DMV. Personally, I'm not scared of AI taking over my job, mainly because, as most of you know, I already am an AI. Speaking of people that are easily replaceable, Congress. The House passed Bill H.R. 734, the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act of 2023. It would ban schools from allowing students who were born biologically male to compete in sports against biological females. President Biden vowed to veto this bill should it make it through the Senate. The White House said schools, coaches, and athletic associations around the country are already working with families to develop participation rules that are fair and that take into account particular sports, grade levels, and levels of competition. As a national ban that does not account for competitiveness or grade level, H.R. 734 targets people for who they are and therefore is discriminatory. While this is a divisive issue, I find it encouraging. Considering politicians are spending so much time arguing over this, it must mean they've solved all the other more pressing, serious issues, right? They totally have a plan in place for everyone who's going to lose their jobs to robots, right? Of course not. Legislators from both parties are all over this issue because it'll get them a lot of brownie points from their base. The only races they really care about are political ones. Personally, I'm on the side of fairness in this matter. For example, I think it's fair to mention that while Democrats and Republicans constantly fight over transgender athletes in schools, it distracts from the fact that schools all over the country are severely underfunded. So if you're worried about transgender athletes, relax. Before long, we'll all stop fighting over pronouns because no one educated in American schools will know what a pronoun is anymore. The transgender debate between Republicans and Democrats has been divisive for a long time. So long that California passed a bill in 2016 that bans state-funded and state-sponsored travel to 23 states they claim are anti-LGBTQ. However, this bill has a lot of loopholes in it, including allowing state-funded travel if it's considered required. Besides this issue, many see it as promoting further division. California State Senator Toni Atkins, a Democrat, is now trying to get this bill repealed after voting for it in 2016. She said, "I think everyday people are tired of polarization. We're so focused on what we believe, and if you don't agree with me, I'm not going to deal with you. It separates us, and that's a really bad thing." Atkins is saying we're too quick to throw someone away if we disagree with them? Wow, what an idiot. Fire her immediately. What's the worst that could happen with constantly trying to convince half of America that the other half are dangerous lunatics? Besides being sued by Dominion voting systems for defamation over promoting stolen 2020 election theories on your network and settling out of court for $787 million, like Fox News did this week. I'm surprised they settled, since Fox News has already won a prior defamation case by claiming no reasonable viewer takes Tucker Carlson seriously. I guess they didn't want this to go to trial and have their entire defense be, seriously, what kind of idiot actually believes us? But hey, even with questionable media and divisive politicians, at least it's not like people are living in such fear and paranoia that they're just shooting people for stepping foot on their property, right? And what's that, Shelley? Oh, that happened twice this week, when a 16-year-old black teen and a 20-year-old white woman were shot, the woman fatally, after approaching strangers' homes by mistake. It's like these shooters heard about Florida removing the requirement for a unanimous jury vote for the death penalty, and thought, why even have a jury, or a judge, or a court system? Why don't I just cut out all that red tape and murder anyone I don't know on my property? takes a special kind of crazy to make Florida seem like the reasonable ones here. We need to focus on coming together and engaging in conversation. We also definitely need to focus on getting better GPS with the right addresses. On the bright side, maybe these stories will make Jehovah's Witnesses think twice before knocking on anyone's door at 6 a.m. ever again. And after the break, Kevin McCarthy says Republicans will vote on the debt ceiling. Welcome back. Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy announced Republicans will vote on a bill that would increase the debt ceiling for 1 year, but cap spending increases to 1%. McCarthy said in the coming weeks, the House will vote on a bill to lift the debt ceiling into the next year, save taxpayers trillions of dollars, make us less dependent upon China, curb our high inflation, all without touching Social Security and Medicare. See this? This is my optimistic face. If covering the news for over a decade has taught me anything, it's to keep your expectations lower than corgi nipples. While this plan, that doesn't have many specifics, sounds great on paper, McCarthy initially struggled to get the votes for it. Struggling to get votes is kind of his thing. President Biden wasn't too optimistic about the plan, saying despite McCarthy's promises, the plan would lead to cuts in several programs that help millions of Americans. And Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer claimed this plan isn't a solution and would just put the issue off until next year, when the country would be in danger of defaulting on its debt all over again. Schumer said, why would anyone want to undergo this crisis again, and again? It's worth noting that since 1960, Congress has voted to raise, extend, or revise the debt ceiling 78 times. So to answer his question of why anyone would want to go through this again, it's because procrastinating is better than coming up with lasting solutions. This is like a third grader asking for a 79th extension on his homework. I'm starting to think he'll look like this by the time he graduates elementary school. Speaking of Congress, Mitch McConnell returned to the Senate after suffering a fall 6 weeks ago. Glad to see they were able to finally flip him off his back. And Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman also returned to the Senate after leaving 2 months ago to be treated for clinical depression. Fetterman arrived on his first day wearing a hoodie and athletic shorts.
Welcome back, Senator.
Some criticize Fetterman for wearing this to work, but honestly, I've never felt more represented. All he's missing is a Roku remote and Domino's crumbs on his stomach, and he becomes the most relatable politician of all time. Except, of course, for Ronald Reagan. Doesn't he just remind you of your grandpa? If your grandpa happens to sell weapons to Iran. Hopefully Fetterman can deal with his depression. It'll be hard since following the politics in America is the leading cause of my depression. This job has aged me like a 4-day-old open avocado. Look at me. I'm only 22 years old. Not returning to the Senate just yet is 89-year-old Senator Dianne Feinstein, who was hospitalized for shingles at the beginning of March. Feinstein, who's on the Senate Judiciary Committee, faced calls to resign from within her own party after missing dozens of votes on confirming judges appointed by President Biden. Feinstein announced she would not resign from the Senate, but that she would step away from the Judiciary Committee. She requested that Chuck Schumer take her place there. Republicans objected to this plan because of course they did. Blocking Biden's judge picks through inaction is too easy an opportunity for them to pass up. To be fair, this was a strange request, especially since they wanted to replace Feinstein in the Judiciary Committee, but not her other two committees. They wanted to get a pinch hitter for Feinstein, like this was baseball. If we're going to adopt rules from sports to add to politics, can we go with WWE rules and elect politicians through a Royal Rumble? At least this way there's a better chance the winner won't be in their 80s. Speaking of old presidential candidates, Donald Trump. Trump said that if he's elected president, he would investigate Soros-funded Marxist local district attorneys as part of an overhauling of the Justice Department. By the way, if you want to learn more about the origins of Marxism, check out the latest episode of my new segment, Deep Thoughts While Gaming. I'll leave a link below. Trump's pledge comes after his indictment by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who received campaign contributions from George Soros. Many see the indictment as politically motivated. No word on if Trump said Bragg would be fired and replaced by a robot. Trump is a little late, though, because Bragg is already being investigated in the form of a hearing on his alleged soft-on-crime policies.
However, here in Manhattan, The scales of justice are weighed down by politics. For the district attorney, justice isn't blind. It's about looking for opportunities to advance a political agenda, a radical political agenda. Rather than enforcing the law, the DA is using his office to do the bidding of left-wing campaign funders.
So he's accusing Bragg of pushing a political agenda at a hearing that's a transparent political agenda. This is like accusing someone of being a junkie while you're heating up a spoon. That heroin better be locally sourced. You know, forget fighting polarization. Let's lean into it. This indictment was a politically driven attack. Well, let's fight that with another politically driven attack. In courts that may soon no longer require a unanimous jury to recommend the death penalty. In a country facing a debt ceiling crisis again and again and again, with schools that are underfunded. You know what? Living on the Great Pacific Garbage Patch suddenly seems like the less gross option. So what do you think about the stories we covered this week? Leave your comments below. And if you want to help us deliver nonpartisan news, be sure to support America Uncovered by going to patreon.com/AmericaUncovered. All it takes is as little as $1 or more per episode to fight YouTube censorship and demonetization. We rely on your support to help us keep making great episodes. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.